All right, so we're here to talk about how to make data talks feel a little bit more comfortable for everybody, including ourselves. And we're really going to lean into leveraging the DataWise protocol to have really great data discussions that move steps forward. And I just want you to know right now that DataWise is a protocol. You may have experience with other protocols that are just as great. Just know that as a department, DataWise is kind of the language that we're going to be using and moving forward with. So we can draw connections if you use a different protocol. There's overlap, there's similarities, so don't worry about that. If you would like to grab today's slide deck and have it available to you, the bit.ly is on the slide here. It's just bit.ly/datatalkspd. And I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat and pin it so that everybody has it. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat as you think of them. If we want to raise hands and ask questions, that's great too. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Allie. I'm a resource teacher with the Office of Educational Resources. I would like to meet 4 objectives today in our 45 minutes. The first one would be just to define what effective data talks are. But we're going to review the DataWise protocol as a whole, explore some templates that I have prepared for you that you could use in your data talk meetings, and then have some collaborative time to discuss together what next steps could be in implementing some of these materials in your data talks at your school sites. Plus, you all are really more experts than you think you are, so learning from each other will be a great use of time as well. So just setting the stage here, what are data talks? Data talks are a routine that a group engages in that is grounded in evidence. It is important that whatever you are doing during a data talk is grounded in something that's real. So often what happens in a data talk is we get into the inferences and the what ifs and our interpretations of data. And that takes us away from the reality of the situation. And so it's important to stay grounded in the evidence that you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, whatever is real. And then work towards finding solutions and taking action. So we're not just having a data talk to discuss data, but we're actually coming up with ideas and and solutions that we can implement to move forward and create progress in whatever way we want to do that. So it's kind of 2 main things: grounded in evidence and in taking action. Those are the 2 signs of a really healthy data talk. In the DataWise protocol, we have the swoosh that some of you may be familiar with, but we also have this kind of big bar at the bottom that has the foundation of everything that a data talk has to have in order to be effective. And they refer to that as the ACE habits of mind. Okay, so the first habit of mind would be that there is a shared commitment to action, assessment, and adjustment. That's the A. We're committed to making choices, using assessments, and adjusting when we need to. And that's going to be us in our data talk group committing to trying things and learning from mistakes. And that is where we have to kind of build trust with each other. If we're going to be taking action and implementing change, does mean that we have to trust each other enough to believe that our shared vision is going to be what's best for the students. The next habit of mind is intentional collaboration. This is not just meeting together to meet together. This is meeting together with norms and a routine and an agenda where we're actually being intentional about the time we spend together. And that's leading to some shared leadership and some empathy that allows us to really have those conversations that can be tough. We've all been in a data talk, I'm sure, at one point in our career where it was uncomfortable to have a conversation about why my students are all below proficiency level in math. And that was a reflection I had to have in my own practice. And I had to know that the people I was intentionally collaborating with weren't there to judge me. They were there to support me and come up with solutions to move things forward. The last habit of mind is that there is a relentless focus on evidence in every data collaboration. This is going to be that idea that data is defined broadly, right? We have quantitative data and we have qualitative data. Both of those are important to find the whole picture, right? One test score is not going to tell the entire picture of a student, but just like when we think about our SSS or early warning insights data, what are we seeing as the whole picture? Where are the patterns and what story is being told by the data that's being presented? Because our students really are more than just one test, we know that, but that one test can be a data point that we use to make plans from. So these habits of mind are the things that we kind of need to agree to when we begin our data talks. We're all committed to action, assessment, and adjustment, collaboration, and a relentless focus on evidence. When we have those things in mind, we can begin the data-wise improvement process. The data-wise improvement process is a protocol. It is something that can last for a short time, or it can last an entire school year. It could last a 5-year strategic plan. It really is dependent on the type of evidence you're looking at and what your goals are. So this is a graphic that refers to the data-wise improvement process. They call it the swoosh. This was created by the team at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. It has been redone over the years. They just recently released a brand new edition of their book. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at the new copy, it's great. There's definitely a broader focus on acknowledging that our students are diverse, and that the evidence that we use to have conversations aren't just test scores. There's more to it. So as you can see at the bottom of the swoosh are those ACE habits of mind we just talked about. If we don't have those, we can't continue on into the swoosh. You have the steps here in the middle in the dark blue. These are the actual kind of like process that you would move through in a data-wise cycle. And then you also have these elaborative questions that can help your data team have conversations and make sure we're addressing all the needs of our learners throughout. But it's kind of broken up into 3 steps. So our first step is the prepare phase. The first 2 steps are to kind of set up for success, right? Create a team that is focused on one outcome. It could be a grade level team, a PLC team, a department team. It could be maybe your school team of your PPC, right? It could be your TLC, your SSS, and your CSIC. Maybe your admin could be part of that team as well, or your dean. You're setting up for success, creating a team, and deciding on some norms, right? What is it that you're going to agree to when you meet together? And then the next step is to build some data literacy. That means making sure everybody has access to whatever data sources you're going to be discussing, and then do any like preliminary training or review so that everybody understands how to access the data from those sources. So in my PLC, it was making sure that my entire team knew how to access their data in iReady because we were going to focus on math. So we really went over the different kinds of reports we could pull, and we all pulled the same reports so that we could compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. But that could also be like making sure everybody has access to the kids' profile in Synergy, or making sure that we all have the same filters on in Unified Insights, right? We just want to make sure we have, we're starting from the same place. And then seeking out any training if we do need training to become more familiar with those data sources. Once we've prepared, we're ready to inquire. This is kind of the deep work that happens in a data-wise cycle. We start to look at the stories that are involved in the situation. This is where we're kind of fleshing out, okay, so what is it that we're seeing? What is it that we need to understand better? So we're having a conversation around math proficiency. We're seeing a lot of kids struggle with the areas of numbers in base 10. That seems to be something that we're here. So what is some information we know about numbers in base 10, about what's already been covered? Maybe we dig into some evidence from their teachers last year. What do we need to know to look at this as a whole picture? And then we dig into the evidence of learning, right? We look at not just data scores, but also performance on classroom assessments and work. Maybe we look at research around how to teach numbers in base 10 more effectively. Maybe we reach out for support from other people, subject matter experts, district people, all that. And then the next step is what I think is the hardest part in any data-wise cycle, and that's examining your own practice. And that's where me as an educator had to go, I'm not doing a great job ensuring that my students have an understanding of the decimal system. That's why they're struggling in numbers in base 10. So I need to improve my own practice. I need to do some self-learning. I need to reach out and do some PD on my own so that I can be a better teacher for these students based on what we're seeing in the learning, right? Or could that examining your own practice be, well, we're only collecting data on Fridays. And maybe a lot of my students are absent on Fridays, or we're not feeling our best on Friday. We're all ready for the weekend. Maybe that's not the best time to collect data from my students either. Could we think about shifting our math instruction cycle so that that data collection happens on a different day, right? Little things like that. That's your examining your practice step, where you're taking what's already happening and seeing what do we need to make a change in to affect that learner or the group of learners we're discussing. Then you act. You develop some sort of action plan that includes an assessment of impact. So for us, that was having a discussion in our data group after we dug into the data and examining our own practice. We knew we needed to do daily targeted number talks around decimals. That was how we were going to make change. So our action plan was to develop those number talk questions, come up with a schedule, make sure it was in our master schedule. We had time dedicated to it every day. And then we put that plan into place. We chose a specific amount of time. We did it for 3 consecutive weeks. And then we came back together, and our assessment was, well, how did students do on the same assessment we gave them before? Afterwards, was there growth, right? And that was the assessing our impact of that intervention. And then we have that conversation. We say, do we need to continue with this? Are we done? Or do we need to now do the same intervention for something else? And the story is that we did make a great impact, and we continued doing data talks around NBT for the rest of the year because that continued to be an area of struggle. So the data-wise improvement process told us that. That was an example of a PLC group using a data-wise cycle in a shortened amount of time. From start to finish, that was probably a 6-week implementation of this cycle, from first data conversation to assessment. Sometimes when we have a protocol like this, we may not make it to the assess until the end of the year, because maybe the assessment is the state test, right? Or maybe it's something at the end of the unit. So it could be a little bit longer. It really depends on how you design your action plan. So to try and make this a little bit easier for you, I've broken this down with some helpful templates that might provide assistance to you. So in your prepare phase, you're going to want to create your collaborative group, identify your data sources, and then seek any training that you may need on those data sources. So this is a link to make a copy of a template of a meeting notes that you could use. If you don't already have a PLC meeting notes document, this is one that you can make a copy of and then edit to your heart's desire. But it basically has all of the typical information, as well as an opportunity for you to cite these specific data sources that you are looking at, set goals, and then it even includes your action plan on here, right? Who is going to do what, when, and where, so that you have very clear next steps from that meeting. Once you move into your inquire phase, one of the strategies that you can use during a data meeting is the notice and wonder protocol. We used this at our very first PPC meeting when we were digging into some examples of school-based issues, right? Maybe that connected to your 90-day plan. So I've made a template for you here that you could just keep and reuse for any specific problem of practice. So up here, you would just fill in your specific problem of practice. For example, student attendance is lower on Mondays and Fridays. And then the notice and wonder is really important. You step back and you take time to just notice, what are the facts, right? What is the data telling us? I noticed that attendance on Mondays is blah, blah, blah for the whole school. I noticed that on Tuesdays, it is this, right? And you can just track the data. Then comes the wonder phase. This is where we start to make ideas, inferential statements based on the noticing to kind of surface some ideas. It's great to use some sort of protocol where each individual person in your data group has that individual time to do a notice and wonder, and then share out with the whole group. I would stick to one type at a time. So do all of the notice first and then all of the wonder next. That way you're focusing on the evidence first before you start making inferential statements, right? We don't want to dive too quickly into making assumptions without the whole picture of what the data is showing us. And then you surface your priority question. Do our students know how to blank? That's a possible sentence frame. You could make it something else, but it's always going to be something that relates to learning that's within your control. And it may help you determine what other data to look at next. Perhaps you need to look at not just attendance data, but maybe we also need to look at behavior data to consider next steps planning. And that's where the next piece in that template comes from. Once you have all that data you need, you come up with your learner-centered problem. What are your students having difficulty with? And that will help you come up with your problem of practice. How are we going to teach and address blank in order to solve our problem? The problem of practice is what helps you identify your action plan. You state your responsible parties, your timeline, and then create your assessment plan, right? How are we going to make sure that whatever we're implementing was either successful, or if it wasn't successful, what could we change next time? Okay. So all of that is contained in this one template. Again, it'll be your own copy, so you can make and edit this however you want to better reflect whatever you need in your data group. You may also want some sort of protocol for sharing the evidence. So if everybody comes to the table with copies of data, their own classroom assessments, that will be very helpful. That way everybody can have the big picture. Maybe you have a shared folder where all of that lives so that everybody has access to it. Once you're ready to create your action plan, you may want to use this template to help you make that. So this template is straight from the appendices of the DataWise book. Again, you're restating your learner-centered problem and your problem of practice, and then whatever instructional strategy it is that you're implementing in order to address those practices. Then we have our task types. If there needs to be any pre-learning, you can figure that out. You figure out who does it. You set your timeline, right? Your due date. And then what are your success criterias, right? What is it? How will you know when you've accomplished this stuff? So first you learn how to use the strategy. Maybe if it's something that we've never done before, we need to learn about it first before we can implement it. We're going to plan how to integrate it into our practice. We're going to actually do the thing, right? The implementation of whatever the strategy is, and decide how long you're going to implement it for. Analyze your short-term data, adjust based on evidence, and then assess your longer-term impact. Is this something we're going to continue to do, or is it something that we need some more time, redo it? Maybe we need to try something else. It didn't quite work. Okay, so this is just a planning document for you to use to kind of put all of those ideas into a place that's really easy to read and understand. And then these are just simply little like smart chips in Google Docs where you double click on them and it pops up a calendar and you can change the date however you'd like to. This could be really easy to share with other stakeholders too, like maybe with your administration, your dean, counselor, other people in PPC on your team, whatever it might be. So I consolidated all of the templates for DataWise into one place. I wanted to create something for you all to be able to track a DataWise cycle so that you had something to kind of check off at every meeting as you were working through the process. Again, if you're using some other kind of protocol, this could be kind of adjusted to fit whatever it is, the protocol that whatever protocol it is that you're doing. So this is a through line template where each step of the DataWise protocol is here and listed. And then you have little check boxes that help you address all of the pieces of that step. So as you're moving through step 2, things that you may want to accomplish during this step are making sure all of your conversations relate to learning and that you're narrowing the scope of your inquiry. And then maybe you take some notes about that step here. If you are a coach who is sitting back and listening to a data meeting at a PLC and you're kind of acting more as a facilitator, this could be a way for you to prompt for positive conversations during a data talk, right? These are your look-fors. Are these things happening during the data meeting as you move through the different steps, which of course can take a little bit longer. You're not going to get through step 7 in one meeting, right? There's just not enough time for that. If you're really looking into evidence, you're going to need at least 2 meetings before you get to that plan. Okay, and then I have the Notice and Wonder protocol, the action plan and assessment template. That's all together in one place for you. If there are other templates that you're like, man, I really wish I had this thing, and you're just like, I don't have enough time to make it. Allie, can you help me? If you think of one of those things, please let me know. I'm happy to help you come up with a solution for your school site to make it a little bit easier for you to manage these data talks. Because the more we are able to be transparent in our data talks and come back to collaborative documents, more likely we are to continue to move forward with positivity and a focus on evidence and all that good stuff. So now I kind of want to turn it over to you all a little bit and give you all a moment to think first and then share a couple questions here. Thinking to any data talks you've engaged in, what works well for you? What have you found to be positive when you engage in data talks?
Setting the tone on the why we're having that discussion has been super helpful so that we can connect it to ourselves in our classrooms easier rather than just showing a bunch of data.
Love that, right? That's why it's so important to tell the picture of the data, not just data without a connection to real people. I love that. Go ahead.
I'd say I try to point out all like the growth or the positives before we then go into what we need more help with or support with. Just to say, yeah, here are our wins, but now here's what we need to work on.
I like that, like a compliment sandwich kind of.
Having very specific protocols with like thought out, whether it's a protocol of looking at data or a protocol of collecting information, but keeping it very grounded in like factual observational stuff rather than going down that staircase of, feelings and things like that.
That brings back the conversation we had about the spheres of influence too, right? Where if we're talking about data, we only have so much that we can control around that data. And so remembering that we may have all of these inferences and these ideas on why things are happening, but coming back to what is it that we can actually influence and change and in our own practice. Yeah, that's super important.
Well, and to add on to that, like one thing I noticed, because we just did this a couple weeks ago, is when we did our protocol, we very much rather than focus, because you can get really spiraled out of control if you focus on what they can't do, rather than we focused on everything we saw them able to do. And once we like aligned everything they were able to do, then we identified the next steps, because you can go down a rabbit hole if you just focus on the negative.
Absolutely. I like that too. Your problems to practice can come from positive things, right? How can we do more of this? Or we have really great scores in reading language, literature. How can we transfer what we're doing into informational, right? Those kinds of things. Love that.
I think a really limited amount of time with my grade levels. So I think it helps when I print out the data for them to look at. So we're not wasting time looking for the data. So that's kind of helped.
It's a great idea. Yeah, and Eileen said linking the data to practice together. Oh, so having like a conversation around like, what does this mean to us in our own practice so that there's some ownership there? Hopefully that's what you mean. If not, correct me. Any other ideas on what works well for you? Any tips that you would want to share to the others in the room?
Well, I put it in the chat. I put linking the data to practice together because a lot of times when we're doing collaboration and we have the data out and we're doing collaborations between grade levels, we all have our own great ideas. And so what doesn't work for one person might work for another person. And so coming together to get all these ideas is just amazing. So I think that works really well, you know, when we're using the practice.
Love
I
that.
mean, using the data to practice together.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and coming together, right? Because our classrooms are all going to be unique. Teachers, the way teachers implement a strategy might be a little bit different in every room. But if we're all committed to the same problem of practice, same focus, then that's really what the good data talk is all about. Okay. This question is more about, it doesn't necessarily have to be based on what I've presented today, but maybe it could be. Maybe it's something that's an idea from a colleague that just sparked an idea in you. Moving forward with your data talks, what's something you would like to change or enhance? So maybe something that you want to continue doing or do even better than you have been. Something you're going to implement moving forward in your data talks. And I know time is a thing, right? We don't have a lot of time with our PLC groups. So could there be a way to create more time? Could there be some flipped learning situations? But you let me know. What do you think?
I don't know if this is really a change or enhancement that I plan, but I kind of have a question, and maybe it could be something for future, for especially the teaching and learning coaches, like further on down the road. Something that I see for a need for me is because I've done data-wise before, and I have like a handful of like different protocols I've used. What I kind of was wondering is maybe in future sessions, maybe could there be where it's just on different types of protocols that could be used for different purposes? Like if I'm focusing with my PSLEs, with my teachers, specifically at looking at student writing, here's some protocols that work best with student writing. If we're focusing on reading or math or things, but different protocols that are more specific and geared towards those areas, so that we're intentional with the data, we're saving some time, and I'm not maybe wasting my teacher's time using a protocol that I think will work, and then we're finding out it didn't, or me wasting a lot of time trying to find the perfect protocol. Does that make sense?
1000% it does. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I wrote it down. Melissa, be more intentional with our data and have a common goal. Yep. Setting protocols, keep conversation focus. Absolutely. Yep.
I think what might improve the plan too is having the buy-in from the teachers and a commitment to using the data to guide their instruction, because sometimes, you know, when we're working together, it doesn't always go back to the classroom, it stops there. So maybe, you know, just getting like a commitment and something to show that we are going to use this data in accordance with our instruction.
That's a great idea. I'm glad you said it. And I guess I would then also just tie into that if we are using DataWise as our protocol, our action plan doesn't have to be huge. Our action plan can be small. Some change in practice is better than no change in practice, right? So if that means we're going to make sure we're doing a number talk at the beginning of every math lesson, or we are going to make sure we spend time doing silent reading every day, where kids get to do a book of their choice, and that's something we're going to implement for change moving forward. Those can be little things that happen over time that maybe our assessment is more beginning of year, end of year. And so don't feel like when you have a data talk, it has to be like this huge deal that's going to make some like huge impact on test scores. Because we know the reality of that is that little steps and little pieces of change are what make the bigger things happen over time. unless you feel like there's something really big that you all want to do a big change. I mean, that's great. Maybe you have a grade level who wants to like completely flip the way they do their instruction, and that's great too. But it's okay if that's not the situation. Any other ideas, changes, enhancements, things you want to continue doing or do more often? Focusing on data discussions focused on the 90-day plan, critical actions. I think a lot of times we write those critical actions in our 90-day plan and then we forget that they exist. And then we try and find the data later to report on them in our check-ins instead of making those part of what we're actually doing to move instruction forward. Yeah, right. And it like, even writing our PDPs based on our 90-day plan would make life so much easier, right? And just connecting everything together. Love that. Yeah, and maybe there are things that surface in your data talks that help drive the 90-day plan work moving forward, right? If there's maybe a vertical alignment team for ELA and you see that there's this one common issue, maybe there's a critical action we could take commonly vertically across. All right. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your expertise with me as well. Hopefully you got something out of this. If anything, use the templates. There will be more sessions on the DataWise protocol. So we'll definitely continue to help you learn more about that if that's something you'd like to dig into in your work. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to support you in any way that we can. The link to this slide deck is in the chat. It's pinned there. But if you have any questions, I'll stay on. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving.